Good afternoon, friends, and welcome. You've caught me enjoying a few moments in the garden. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and just enjoying the relaxing time in the garden. So thought I'd take this moment just to share a bit of a message with you, which I've been asked to pass on behalf of the leaders of Westdale Lane. So you'll be familiar, we've got our deacons who take responsibility for leading the church. That's Pat and Rose and Sarah and Janine. They've asked me to share a message with you regarding the reducing of the lockdown restrictions. As you'll know, because it's hard to escape this kind of news, July the 19th, that's just 2 days from now, Monday, July the 19th is the day when the enforced or sort of government enforced restrictions for lockdown are lifted. And it's a day that many people have been waiting for. Some people, of course, will still be very nervous about that. Others will be waiting for that moment to occur when we are free, suddenly, to make our own choices, to live life again however we want to. A day when, if we choose to, we can unburden ourselves from our masks. We can hug freely, for those of you who like hugging, and we can sing to our heart's content. We're free to do all that God has called us to be. It's a day that the government have decided to go ahead with the unlocking of the restrictions, and they are encouraging us to take personal responsibility. Boris Johnson has said it will be down to you to choose how you want to live your life in terms of removing some of those restrictions. And even though the pandemic is continuing, the risks are still there. The government is giving us the choice and the flexibility to decide how we care for one another through this difficult time. They've made this decision in the midst of increasing case rates across the country, and the government have suggested and decided that the time is right to do this because of the value of our amazing vaccination rates. So although the cases are increasing, the number of people going into hospital is relatively low. And although the cases are increasing, the number of people who continue, very sadly, to lose their lives is much lower than it has been before. This doesn't mean, of course, that it's time to just let everything go. It doesn't mean, of course, that we really can just get back to how it used to be. The thing about personal responsibility, as opposed to being told by the government what to do, is that it puts a burden of responsibility on our shoulders. We need to decide individually, and for us as a church, of course, we need to decide together what that means for us. How do we care for those around us who are more vulnerable than we are? How do we respond to the flexibility we've got to live differently? How do we respond to this change of rules? Clearly we will feel differently to one another about this. Some will be breathing a sigh of relief, and some of us will be very nervous and cautious, perhaps anxious almost, about the risks that continue and what that might mean, putting ourselves at risk, putting others at risk. The choices we make, how we behave, what we do in the coming days and weeks really matter. What we choose to do with the freedom that will be ours really does make a difference. We know that at some point the restrictions have to open up, and as they do, we need to take responsibility in how we react to those changes. So what does this mean for us as a church? What does this mean for friends of Westdale Lane Baptist Church? Well, in terms of our activities, those midweek activities, you won't see much change. But of course, over the last few months, we have begun to open up in terms of meeting for Sunday worship. And this gives us the freedom to meet as we want to. In particular, the changes from Monday will give us the freedom to sing. That's been one of the most tricky things for us, hasn't it? Because it's very hard to keep the words in when we're wanting to sing out those songs of worship. So over the coming weeks, we will continue to meet online and in person in the church. We will fit in with the rules as we try to be creative within restrictions. And for those of us who have attended in person, as well as it being a blessing in recent weeks, it's also been difficult at times. Because the statistics show that we're not yet in the best position in terms of transmission and case rates, the leaders, that's Pat, Rose, Sarah and Janine, have decided that a cautious relaxation of the restrictions for our in-person services is wise. This follows the advice from both the government and their advisors, but also our own Baptist Union. We wouldn't want our times of worship together to be a place where the virus is spread. We wouldn't want our times of worship together, however joyful and important they are, to be a place that puts people at risk. Ultimately, we are called to care for one another. And as we take that personal responsibility, we must take the responsibility to care for those who are vulnerable around us, particularly in that situation where we gather together as a group. So in the coming weeks and months throughout July and August, we'll continue to have our weekly services in person. You're very welcome to join us. Those services will also be broadcast live through Facebook, and all are welcome to join us to worship in either of those ways. We're in the process of making those live stream services through Facebook better. Of course, we've had to struggle with some of the technology glitches as we've been finding our way through this, but we are in the process of getting better equipment and more permanent solutions to that to make the live services more effective. But if you choose to attend in person, then there are a few things you need to consider. As a church, we've decided to keep social distancing in place during the service, at least until the case rates decline and it feels safer to be a bit closer to one another. We're also going to be intentional about ventilation. That means the windows will be open to make sure we've got good airflow. So if the weather's cold, please bear that in mind, bring a jumper. It also means that we'll be able to sing. That's something that many of us have been waiting for a long time and looking forward to. But what about face coverings? Well, you'll have heard there's been lots of discussion about face coverings. We are not going to insist that people wear face coverings in the building. But the current advice still suggests that face coverings are an important barrier to the spread of the infection. They are a really important part of keeping people safe. So although face coverings are optional, the general consensus is that face coverings are a benefit. And therefore we would encourage you to wear a face covering if you feel able to. Guidance around singing suggests that wearing a face covering adds extra protection as well. So again, if you are wanting to sing out loud, a face covering is a good idea to help keep yourself and others safe. To keep each other safe, you might want to also consider testing. This has been encouraged throughout Nottingham over recent months, with lots of information available around the availability of testing. You can access lateral flow testing yourself quite easily, and it may be that you feel able to do this before attending worship. You can access lateral flow tests from your local pharmacies, or you can order them online, so please make every effort to do regular testing if you're able to. Many of us have been doing this for recent weeks and months, and it's relatively straightforward, so please don't worry about that. So to sum up what we've said, singing is back. Hooray! That's good news. Face masks are optional, but encouraged, especially while rates of infection remain high. Social distancing is here to stay for a little while longer at least. And if you're a bit nesh, bring a jumper. Of course, be aware that while we deal with all of this, people will respond differently. People will cope differently. People will have different opinions. So if you're a hugger, or you've been waiting for that opportunity to hug, perhaps just consider the other people who might not quite be ready for that yet, and maybe ask consent before giving a hug. Make sure that you're aware of how others feel about what's happening and the environment around them. Make sure people feel welcome. And make the effort to love one another and respect each other's opinions, even if their opinions are different to you regarding this matter. Hear these words from Ephesians. I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So whether it's online or whether it's in person, we really look forward to seeing you in the coming days and weeks. And love one another, care for one another, enjoy the freedoms that are ours, but be careful and keep safe. Thank you.